Hey everyone, and welcome to the Procreate demo for the piece I call Barf Coffee. So I named the video that because that's the name of this character. I actually asked my son what his name should be, and he said Barf Coffee, and I kind of thought that was amazing actually. So this punker's name is Barf Coffee. When I started this, it was sort of in the middle of a period where I didn't really know what I was going to draw. I just sort of wanted to do a full body character, and I had been sort of trying and failing to do a bunch of, mecha or armored characters or medieval or future or whatever. And I was sort of getting into a rut, so I just figured, fuck it, let's do something contemporary. Let's do something that's maybe even a little bit funny, and that's what sort of led me down this path. I've always thought it was pretty funny when folks try to stay super current with fashions, but the fashions don't really take advantage of their body type. So I thought that it was kind of funny to have this like really overweight dude that's in these skinny jeans and he's being all punked out and stuff, and how it just sort of has this incongruent feel. So that's sort of where the whole basis for this idea came. So I worked on this and then left it alone for a while, and then worked on it and left it alone for a while. So all in all, I did this in about a week, but it was like, some rough sketching one night and then put it away, and then another 20 minutes of rough sketching and then put it away. And so that's sort of the mindset that I was in when I was working on this. I was really working on it a little bit and then putting it down a little bit and putting it down. The main drawing utensil that I use for this is the fat pencil, which is in the description below, and I've talked about it a lot in the past. I do it for the roughs as well as for the final lines. The only difference is I might change the thickness of it as far as the thickness goes, just in your normal brush slider, so that I can get various looks out of it. It might look a little on the clean side sometimes when you see like that, maybe that hard black line by his face, but that's really just because I go over it a few times. You see some tricks there with the can, where I just used the big solid airbrush brush and made a dot and then warped it into an ellipse, and then used that ellipse to base the dimensions of the can on. Here you can see I actually screw up this hand. I have no idea why. I roughed it in perfectly fine the first time. In fact, I write a little note here where I write ugh. I roughed it in fine, and then when I went in here to do the basic blocking, it just wasn't coming together. So it took me a while here to readjust the hand, and then I finally really get into it, which is why you'll see a lot in this piece that there's sort of a more general rough, and then I'll go in and I'll do a more detailed rough in certain sections. I think it happens on the hand, and then it happens on his belt, and then it happens on his other hand, and then it happens on like his shoes. So there's a lot of areas where I maybe did something a little bit too rough and had to go in and supply myself with some more information in order for me to tighten it up. Also, when I was working on this, I was watching the new season of MST3K, so I was probably stopping to laugh quite a bit, and each sort of section of this guy is going to be another episode of MST3K that I was watching. Probably watched 3 episodes or so, so I guess you could say that loosely time boxes how long it took me to do this. Here I'm using that circle to ellipse trick again, using the airbrush. And then I tried to make these spikes, somewhat organized, tried to find some sort of a basic way to really do this, but I think that ultimately it came out, when you look at the whole piece, the spike gauntlet works, but when I was sort of finishing it, I was kind of not super happy with it, but in the grand scheme of the piece, it's not too distracting. Maybe for me, but hopefully not for anyone else. So you can see there that that hand and that beer can, I think I might have said Coke can earlier, I meant beer can, and that zipper, and then the bracer, those were all lots of separate layers that were all coming together. And so at this point in the piece, after sort of completing all of those sections, what you're seeing is right now only 2 layers. It's the tighter line and then the rough sketch underneath. Because I keep merging the rough sketch from the, say the hand or the belt into the original rough sketch, and then I keep merging my tighter lines together so that they are only just sort of like one big master line. So now at this point, the arm is more or less wrapped up, and I'm just going and doing the sort of frayed jacket sleeve, or lack of sleeve, armhole right there. And the whole time I was doing it, I was sort of debating as to whether or not he was going to get like a big sleeve of tattoos or what, but I feel like the most, I don't know, the sort of like most like gutter punk type look is actually just like a couple of shitty tattoos. So that's why I ultimately just did like some pretty bare bones knuckle tattoos, and then I threw in the token black flag tattoo on his right arm, and then I put the Eat the Rich tattoo. It's just a very badly drawn picture on his left arm. So we'll get to those eventually. Now what I'm doing is I just did the buttons, which was done by doing the ellipse tool, or not the ellipse tool, the ellipse trick, I guess you could say, and then I just warped that to get all my different buttons right there. So now I'm doing the mohawk. It's always funny to me how super spiky hair is fairly easy to draw, and then it's super tedious and annoying to color. So you always just sort of throw it in like an afterthought when you're doing the lines, and then you go to do the color and you're like, oh god. Also, I happen to be recording this particular video in my basement, and my nose is starting to run, so I'll try to edit out all the little sniffs as best I can, but I apologize if I miss some. This is sort of one of those characters that, you know, when you look at your average like hardcore punker that's got all this adornment going on, you sort of can recognize that there's a lot going on there, but then when you're just sort of casually like, hey, yeah, I'll just draw like a punk guy with like a punk vest with a bunch of shit on it, and then you get in the middle of doing it, you're just like, oh god, there's a lot going on here. So we've got the pins, which I eventually put stuff in the pins, and then, you know, I'm doing this little trim, and then I realize, oh shit, I need that belt that runs on the coat. So I put the belt in, which is what we're seeing right here. And then once you get that in, you're like, oh, but I also put a belt on his pants, so then I got to do that. And, you know, belts are actually one of my favorite things to draw. I love drawing buckles. So that's cool, but that it means it's just a lot of work having to make sure that all makes sense. So at this point, I'm going in and I'm putting little pyramids on the loops for that, the coat belt, and then I'm doing the actual like looping for the buckle part. Now you'll notice too that when eventually I do this buckle, and then I do like the curve of his gut, and there's a big tangent there, and I spend quite a bit of time in the piece just sort of ignoring it, and then I eventually I come to terms with it, and I realize I have to fix it. I'll point that out when it happens though. So now here we're just doing the standard sort of punk rock studded belt buckle, where it's got that like metal sleeve around it that you know, it kind of turns around it so that it rolls in more easily, and just finalizing some of the nicks and scratches on that. And now at one point I was going to put pyramids under the collar, but I kind of didn't like the way it was turning out, so I abandoned that. And now I just start putting in the zipper. It's quite a stylized zipper. I understand that the zipper is pretty like prongy, like it just sort of sticks out, but I wanted to match the type of zipper that I had on that pocket there, so I just sort of went with it and kept it like that. So there you can see the gut line, and the edge of the buckle is very tangential. It's at least close enough that it just feels really uncomfortable. So eventually you'll see me change that. So now I put the hair on his sort of butt poking out there. And now I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of noise going on, so I'm going to start separating it. This sort of goes to one of the Q&A questions about line weight. Here's where I made like a very deliberate decision where I said, okay, well, in order to separate this a little bit from his body, I'm going to go ahead and put a heavier line around the arm, just to bring that forward a little bit. Okay, so now we're going in and doing the lock. I just sort of kept it cartoony, so I didn't really care too much about the perspective on it. I hate doing chain links unless I'm doing them really rough and they can be sort of like a badly formed medieval chain link or something. So to be honest, I really half-assed the chain links here and I should have done a better job. In the middle of doing this, I came up with the idea to take a standard master lock and make it a servant lock, because of like maybe hinting at the fact that he's got sort of like a S&M aspect to him. Okay, so at this point the really shitty chains are just about done, and then I move on to his regular belt, the pants belt, although it's not really doing much to hold up his pants. So here you can see I'm just sort of slowly but surely blocking it in. I find that a belt is best to do in stages, where you're sort of establishing the first major shape, and then you figure out exactly where the buckle is going to land, and then you put like the curved part where the buckle is, the belt is going over that sort of bar in the buckle, and then you tuck it back under, and that whole thing is sort of the order by which I go about doing it. So you can see here that I'm putting it in really rough, again echoing what I said about doing that rougher hand. So now that I've got more information here, I can go ahead and tighten it up. So eventually I'll end up merging the roughs from that belt into the master roughs. So on this type of belt, in order to differentiate it from the other one, you can see that the edges of it it doesn't have the like tubing or like that rib that sort of goes around the entire thing. I've worn plenty of belts like this, so I was just sort of basing it off of that. But it also helped to differentiate, because since the coat has that tubing, I went ahead and gave the belt the same tubing so that all felt the same. So it's kind of cool because it ends up giving him a little bit more of this, like, this is a put together look as opposed to a look that just sort of came out of the box. Some of it's the damage, some of it's the fact that it's like two different belts, some of it's like all of that. So that was sort of what I was trying to encapsulate. I wanted to try and have all of his articles of clothing feel like they came from separate places, and then also have them feel a little bit personalized on top of it. So now we're doing his left leg, and I stop at the feet because I know the feet are going to be complicated, so I wait. Oh, here we go, extending the buckle. You can see I just cut it and moved it and then filled in that gap. And now we've got less of a tangent problem going on there. And now I'm moving on to the other leg. So I start by just doing the master anatomy of his leg. Since the pants are so tight, I can just sort of do almost like a naked leg. And then I go back in and add some crisscrossing folds from the pants. I'm realizing right now, because it always comes back to me what I was watching. When I was doing that leg, my wife and I were watching Bondi Inc., which is this terrible tattoo show set in Bondi, Australia, Bondi Beach. And we watch a lot of those just because they're fun and they're a train wreck and whatever, but this one was absolutely the worst. So if you're looking for like a train wreck of a show to just have on in the background and maybe help yourself feel superior, I recommend checking out Bondi Inc. It's probably on Netflix. At least it is here in Germany. So now here I've got the layers, all the line layers sort of lowered in opacity, so I can go in and put all the rips and tears, and I can keep it really separate. And then I went in and erased whatever it was that I was covering up underneath. And then the last thing here is just making sure all the line weights there feel like they make sense, basically. So now I'm throwing in the distant collar on his coat, and then putting in a couple of buttons. And then, finishing in his shirt and just some tweaks there. And now we're going to do some buttons here. So I do, in case you can't see it in any of the versions before, I do a sort of a skank and pickle button here. And then I do an off button. And then I do a Dead Kennedys one. The off one and the skank and pickle one are just sort of loosely inspired by their general imagery, but the DK one is obviously straight Dead Kennedys logo. And then that smaller black one is a NoFX one. And then I do a Bad Religion one. And then the one that's rolling off into the distance is just sort of a generic one. And then that sort of small, all the way to the left one is actually a little eyeball, because I always try to do like a Dan Pothast eyeballs pin. And then the other one is just like a generic one. So a couple of those are just sort of faked. And that little black one below the sort of lock is a DRI one. And now here, of course, you got to put the standard Subhumans patch. So I just went ahead and did that. And now we're building the microphone. So this is using some of the circle trick. I'm building it vertically because the perspective on this isn't that important for the piece. So I'm just sort of doing it flat and vertical so I can build the microphone. And then I'll turn it so that it fits approximately where I want him to be holding it, which is right there. Here we go. I'm taking master from the master lock logo, and I'm just doing the same sort of text tracing thing that I did with like the farmer piece, so that I could spell out servant and get that on the lock. So now we're doing that sort of advanced rough to try and get the hand figured out that's holding the microphone, and now I'm doing the clean line on that hand. And then that rough will get merged into the major rough later, or the main rough, I guess. Okay, so now we bring him back in and we do the, I'm going to predict that we're doing the chord. Yeah, there we go. So doing the chord for the microphone. I like to think that he's basically on stage announcing, you know, hey, thanks everyone for coming out to Crust Fest or something like that. And then, you know, first band up, that type of thing. And he's already drunk, like it's the first show of the day, and he's already pretty well where he needs to be. So now we're doing the shoes, and the pants that sort of join into the shoes. I wanted to be much more specific with the shoes on this one, in terms of getting like the lacing down and the exact shoe. So I just looked up some Chuck Taylors and made sure that I was really nailing the exact construction of those instead of faking it. And then I went in and did some pretty detailed lacing and made sure that they're cross-laced and that they weren't sort of the normal cartoon, just sort of like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, just sort of over, as opposed to actually being crossed. So that's just sort of the work that I put in there on that shoe. And then I ripped off the Converse thing, and, you know, he scratched an Anarchy logo in because why not, you know, fuck the man and all that stuff. And then we move on to the other shoe. So this one was another scenario where I really needed to do a rough to sort out the perspective on that foot before I actually got into it. So I do a rough first on that foot also. I feel like most artists have probably drawn tennis shoes or Chuck Taylor specifically like 100 times, and you probably have like a really quick way of doing it, but this and I just wanted for this time to actually do it completely right instead of just doing the symbolic, everybody knows it, Chuck Taylor. And when we get to the coloring, of course, I made them 2 different colors because that just seems like something he decided to do one day. Oh, I know, I'll just wear one from each, and you know, that type of thing. I sound like I have a lot of disdain for punkers, but in fact, that's like sort of my main clique. But I just think it's really funny when, you know, you really analyze some of the choices, and they're supposed to come off as like, I don't give a shit, but it's like really calculated, and I always thought that was kind of funny. Get some duct tape on that shoe, and then start working out these laces. So here, in order to try and make sure I did this right, or at least somewhat right, there's a lot of layers just in figuring out these laces so that I can erase away a second later, you know. I do a lot of flipping them back and forth and just trying to generally piece it together. I try to draw each one if it makes sense to draw it, but if it also fits for the perspective, I might just flip one or something. So that's sort of how I solve that. And then once that whole shoe is pieced together, I can on a new layer do the laces that are from the knot hanging down, and then I just sort of put those in and then erase from behind there, and that's sort of how the whole thing gets sorted. Okay, so on the other side of the belt got put in, the part that conjoins to it, and now here we go, throwing in the black flag tattoo. And then we got the Eat the Rich tattoo, which is like for some reason a butt with a fork in it and a fist holding the fork. And the fist of course has like a studded bracelet, because that seems right. And then he's got knuckle tattoos, which say with mayo. And then the A on mayo is the anarchy symbol. So now I'm just using the chalk, I think it was the chalk pastel brush, just because I wanted something that had like a little bit of texture to it, and I wanted the whole thing. I knew I wasn't going to do like real lighting on this, so I just wanted to make it crafty kind of looking. So I wanted him to be really pale, but then like a little sunburned and a little blushed up because he's been drinking, and he might be a little burned from the day because he's at the he's at the festival, and he's out in the sun all day. So then put some 5 o'clock shadow on him. Got the eyes colored, got the hair colored, got the shirt. But then as this piece went on, I sort of had a lot of struggles with certain values, so you'll see me adjusting a lot of things as it goes. So first shot at the coat, first shot at the shirt. The background right now is fairly on the dark side, but I sort of always had the plan to go in and with sort of a painterly quality brighten up the background, so I sort of knew that was coming eventually. Now, this brush was actually a little bit of a pain in the ass to work with, but I embraced that. It smears the colors that are underneath. There you go, I just darkened the coat and lightened the shirt. And now we're moving on to the jeans. So it smears the colors underneath. So at times I embraced the fact that it was kind of a pain in the ass, but at other times I just suddenly switched to like the fat pencil if I just wanted to shove some color in somewhere and it wasn't behaving properly. Now we're filling in Barf's belt, and I wanted the 2 leathers to seem like a little different, at least not too different, but a little bit. And then we got the shoes colored in. In order to do the white on the shoes, I just turned off the background for a second so that I could see it more clearly. And now we're just coloring in the duct tape and all the little details. This is actually really straightforward, aside from the fact that I'm wrestling with the brush. So it's really just picking a few colors, painting it in, keeping the whole thing relatively pale and a touch on the yellow side, and then tweaking if I need to in order to separate certain things out. I knew he had a lot of metal on him, so I just sort of saved the metal for the last. So anything that I knew was going to be just like a standard shitty silvery metal, I just saved. I wanted his laces to be dirty. I think ultimately I brightened them a little bit at the very end, but I just wanted them to be dirty because nobody's laces last that long. And then obviously, his sleeve ripping might be more of a white in real life, or it might get a little dirty so it turns a little yellow, or maybe it stays like black, but I just sort of wanted it to stand out but not be distracting from the rest of it, so I went with a gray. So now we're on to metal. So we've got the necklace chain, we've got the zippers, we've got the all the pyramids across the whole thing, we've got the spikes on his arm, we've got his safety pin through his eyebrow, his earrings. So I'm just sort of going through all this. We're doing the buckle right now, and then those sort of back riveted, grommeted, I guess, holes, and then moving through and just making sure we're hitting all the metal. Now, like I said, I didn't do a lot of lighting on this, but I do end up doing like a little bit of some bounce, and then I make sure that I try to capture some of the bounce in the metal as well. And then something that was kind of fun was I then went in with like a white fat pencil on top of all of it to give it like a rim light and to do some of the metal, and I thought it would just give it kind of a neat, natural look. Here's generic brand beer, which is sort of looks like a pop can, but it's barely beer. There's like a B in there, but you can't really see it. Beer brand beer. that's what he's drinking. So now there's the rips in the jeans, getting that white in there. And now I'm taking all his tattoos and I shift them to be more of like a faded blue-gray because it just makes more sense. Now we're doing all the buttons. And the patch. The Subhumans patch. One of the nice things about the brush picking up the colors underneath is that it makes it so that like the whites are a little bit on the dirty side, which is kind of cool. Another thing with this piece is I sort of called it done and then I came back to it later. So at some point you're going to see I come back in and I put like a print on his shirt and I tweak the blue on his lock because I wanted it to be a different color just that fit the vibe of the piece a little bit more. You can see the bounce orange on the metal specifically, which is was fun to do, and I just thought added a nice touch. And now here I'm going in with the with a white fat pencil to put a rim light on him. And you'll see I do a little bit extra of it on those spikes, the tall spikes. This was kind of fun when I was doing the mohawk. I just sort of, drew in some strokes of the hair, and then I later come back with a green and add like a couple of extra flyaways coming off of his mohawk. Oh, there we go. That's what I was talking about with some of the reflection on the on those spikes, catching some of the rim light. I would say that this one in general also was sort of went through the most like tweaky adjustments where I was just like, oh, the shirt should be 1 point darker and this should be 1 more point towards green or something like that, because since it was it's like a somewhat detailed line art, but it's pretty simple color scheme. Okay, so now just fixing up the mayo stuff and adding a bunch of little sort of like last minute tweaky things and turning some on and some off and really trying to mess with the whole thing. We're going to end up with the final in a second here. There's a noise filter on it at the very end. And so now here's the lines, so you can see the lines just nice and clean. And then here are the final colors. So pretty straightforward, a long one, just because there was a lot that went into the lines, but I really hope you dug it. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them below. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.